Hi beauties, Rosie here from rosypenya.com, a fashion, sewing, and lifestyle blog. Welcome back to my channel. I am so excited that you're here. So in today's video, we're going to be doing another awesome episode of Sewing with Rosie. And in this video, we're going to be making Vogue 9109, which is this really beautiful top. The view that we're going to be working on is view B as far as the length, but we're actually going to be attaching the collar. So we're going to be using the collar from view C. The fabrics that you want to choose are some kind of a stable knit or even a lightweight woven fabric. We're also going to be needing some bias tape for this project, and we're also going to need some interfacing for the collar. You don't need any zippers or buttons, but you will need a hook and eye for this project as well. So go ahead and grab your fabric and your notions and also your pattern, and we can go ahead and get started. Also, if you guys are wondering about the top I'm wearing, it's actually another Sewing with Rosie episode. I'll have that linked up here in an iCard above. Alright you guys, in today's video we're going to be working on Vogue 9109, and we're going to be using this really beautiful Ponte knit that I got from Joann Fabric. I'll have a similar option linked in the description bar below. You'll also need a contrasting fabric in a similar weight, and you'll also need some bias tape, also some fusible interfacing. As always, you just want to lay your fabric with right sides together and the selvage edges meeting. So the selvage edge is just the finished or neaten edge of the fabric. Go ahead and fold your fabric together and then cut out your pattern pieces according to the grain line. First, you'll need pattern piece number 1, which is your front, and this is cut on the fold. Make sure you transfer those bust dart markings. Next, you'll need pattern piece number 5, which is your back, and this is cut 2 times. Make sure you transfer that marking along the center back. Next, you'll need pattern piece number 7, which is your Peter Pan collar. You'll need to cut 2 pairs of these. So one pair of this will be interfaced, just like you see here. Very first step is to just pin those bust darts. So I like to pin at the end point of the bust dart, and then I like to fold the fabric with right sides together and place my pin through one dart leg and make sure that I'm coming out on the opposite edge of the fabric on the other side of the dart leg as well. Repeat this to the remaining dart. You want to grab your back pieces with right sides together, and we're going to pin along the center back. We're going to stop at that center back marking. From there, above is going to be left open. Next, we're going to grab our Peter Pan collar pieces, and we're going to place our non-interface pieces to our interface pieces with right sides together, and we're going to pin along the outer curved edge. So the edge that does not have a notch on it. So go ahead and just pin on the outer edges of one pair and then repeat that to the other pair as well. Now we can take our fabric to our sewing machine, and we're going to first sew the darts in place. So start at the dart legs, and then you're going to sew to the dart point. But don't backstitch whenever you get to the dart point. You want to leave a few inches of loose thread, and then you just want to tie a double knot at the end and then clip off the excess thread. Repeat that to your remaining dart as well. Now you want to sew the center back seam in place with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And whenever you get to the marking on the center back, make sure you backstitch very well along this point. Now we can move on to the Peter Pan collar. So go ahead and just sew with 5/8 of an inch along that outer curved edge where you pinned in place. Again, with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So sew along the outer curved edge and then sew along that short underside as well. Repeat that step to your remaining collar pieces. time you sew a seam, you want to press the seam as well. So trim off any loose threads that you have, and now we're just going to press our bust darts down, and we're just going to press those neatly in place. Repeat that to your remaining dart as well. I went ahead and serged along the center back seam edges of my garment. So go ahead and neaten the edges with your desired method and then press that seam open. And whenever you get to the opening edge along the neckline, you just want to press that 5/8 of an inch again open as well. When we take this to our sewing machine, we're going to sew along that V opening, and we're going to sew along one neaten edge, across the opening point, and then up the other side. Now we want to trim off the excess seam allowance along the collar edges that we just sewed. So go ahead and use your rotary cutter and cutting mat or your stitch to trim off the seam allowance on both collar pieces. Trim as close as you can to your stitching line without cutting past your stitches. Now we want to fold our collar piece with the right side facing out, and we're going to gently press our collar pieces flat. Once you have both collar pieces gently pressed flat, you just want to pin those opening edges together. You can use your scissors or a point turner to press out those corner pieces of the collar. First, we're going to sew the seam allowance on the back opening edges. So go ahead and just start at one point of the back neck, sew down, then you want to lift your presser foot and reposition your fabric, sew across the bottom edge, repeat that, and then sew up the other side. Now we're going to use a basting stitch to sew across the collar opening edge. So a basting stitch is just the longest stitch setting on your machine. It's a temporary stitch used to temporarily hold your fabric in place. Trim off any loose threads you may have, then you just want to gently press along that back opening. Then you want to grab your front and you're going to place it to your back with right sides together, and we're going to pin along both shoulder seams and both side seams as well. Your collar pieces, and you're going to place them side by side with the round edges meeting. We're going to zigzag stitch these in place within the seam allowance. Take your fabric to your sewing machine, and we're going to first sew along the side seam with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to remove those pins as you go, and also back stitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. Make sure you keep those bust darts facing down. Go ahead and sew your shoulder seams again with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance as well. Go ahead and tack your collar pieces together with a zigzag stitch. Next, I'm going to sew a 5/8 of an inch stay stitch along both armhole openings and also along the neckline as well. Now that we've sewn our side seams and our shoulder seams as well, I'm going to bring my iron in and gently press those seams to one side. Go ahead and repeat that to your shoulder seams as well, pressing that seam to the back. Turn your top with the right sides facing out, and then you want to bring your collar piece in and you're going to place that along the neckline just as if it's going to be worn. So go ahead and just pin the collar to the neckline, matching those dots on the collar and the dots on the neckline as well, keeping those raw edges nice and even. You want to sew the collar to the neckline with 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge, making sure to remove those pins as you go and also backstitch at the beginning and the end of your seam. I have my collar sewn in place. I'm actually going to finish the armhole openings. So I'm going to fold along that stay stitch line that I made 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. I'm going to fold that to the wrong side, and I'm just going to sew very close to the raw edge. You can neaten this edge if you prefer with the serger or your desired method, or since we're working with the knit, you can just sew very close to that raw edge. Repeat that to your remaining armhole opening as well. To neaten the neckline of the collar and the neckline of the top, we're going to bring in our bias tape and we're going to open that up and we're going to pin along the creased edge of the bias tape right along our stitching line that we previously made. So I'm just going to pin that in place all along the neckline of the garment, and then whenever I get to the ends of the back opening, I'm going to fold the bias tape to the wrong side so that we have a nice neat edge. Top to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew along the crease line of the bias tape. Now that you've sewn the bias tape in place, you're going to trim off that excess seam allowance of the garment and the bias tape, and then we're going to fold the bias tape into the wrong side, encasing that seam that we just sewed. Fold the bias tape to the wrong side to encase that seam, so that bias tape is going to neatly encase that seam allowance along the neckline. Carefully sew your bias tape in place, making sure you have the collar pressed away from the neckline as you're sewing so you don't catch it underneath. Again, you're just working on the bias tape and the neckline of the garment, not the collar. Now we're going to finish the hem of the garment, so go ahead and just press the hem to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch and sew very close to the raw edge. You can press this up at your ironing table if you prefer. So we've sewn the hem in place, we're just going to gently press the hem to neaten along the entire bottom edge. Also going to bring in my pressing cloth so that I can gently press on the right side of my fabric along the collar. Very last step is to hand sew a hook and eye along the back neck opening, and you're working on the bias tape. Once you've secured your hook and eye in place along that back neck, you can turn your garment with the right side facing out. And you're all done sewing Vogue 9109. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you stick around to the end where I'll insert some more photos of me wearing this gorgeous top. Thank you so much for watching. All right, you guys, you are all done sewing Vogue 9109. I hope you enjoyed sewing this pattern with me. Again, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit like and subscribe to my channel for more awesome sew along videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys!